Hello, and welcome back to Creators Chat.
Hi, strangers!
A 1 year intermission?
It's got to be
like
at least
that.
a year.
Yeah.
I think it might be a little bit over a year at this point.
It's been a while. So
It's been a very busy year.
It has, and we're obviously in a new space now. Woo!
We finally have our own home.
Yes, we have our own place, and now we have our own space that we can actually do this stuff in, which should make it a lot easier to do. Before it was always a pain of setting up and taking down and sharing the space with other stuff we were doing at the time.
We had to convert our living space every time we did a video, which was a nightmare.
Yeah.
But now we've got a setup. We feel like real adults. I was going to say professionals, but I might be pushing it a little bit.
Never feel like that. I don't even know if we feel like adults. Really? Really?
No.
Do you? No.
Does anybody?
No, nobody does.
Anyway.
This is when we have a breakdown.
Yeah, welcome back.
So yeah, did you want to talk about what we've been doing? Or at least summarizing.
So
Otherwise it'll be like a 10-hour episode.
Yeah, talk about everything we've done in the last year. So we moved house and restarted our life, which was wonderful.
Yay.
We also really kicked off our reference project, reference.pictures, which I think we mentioned the last time we did a video.
Yeah.
But it grew exponentially.
Yeah.
I think that when we did our last video, we pretty much owned a cloak and made a reference pack with the cloak, and we had a great time. Now we have a whole closet of reference things. We have tons of packs up online. We're working with other models. We have a mixture of all sorts of, we've got landscape, figurative, we've got costumed, all sorts of fun things. So that's been taking up a lot of our time, and we've really loved it. It's been the best.
Yeah, it's been such an awesome project to get to do. It's just a blast to do. People love doing them. I love seeing all the art that people do from it.
That's so much fun.
Yeah, there's just hundreds and hundreds of paintings and drawings and stuff, and it's just awesome.
It really is. I never anticipated it being such a big sort of thing. I really just thought it was going to be a bit of fun for us, but it's turned into a real project, which is, I love it. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
You've been oil painting?
Yeah. Ta-da. So yeah, I've been doing a lot of painting. Still just magic stuff, but a lot of oil paintings, trying to focus on that. And yeah, whatever else we've been doing. A little bit of traveling.
Always traveling.
More events, the same old, same old.
Yep, I think pushing our fitness, which has been quite
nice. There you go.
Yep.
The fitness thing, that'll be something we'll be talking more about in future episodes.
Yeah. But things have been pretty good for us. They've been both busy but balanced.
Yes.
And we've been finding time to do lots of new things.
Yeah.
But that kind of nicely segues in what we wanted to talk about today, which is kind of finding a better work-life balance, which we've already kind of covered, but more specifically shifting the focus for our work away from the output and into the input. So it was about, let me see, must have been about August when we first discussed this. We were getting a little bit restless because obviously when we were moving into our new house, we had to dedicate a lot of time to life stuff, and suddenly it was hard to find time to work. It felt like work was a distraction, which was completely obtuse.
Yeah.
But we were really struggling to just mentally make time for work when we had all this other stuff going on. We had paperwork and finances and decorating and blah.
Yeah.
And we were getting kind of restless and antsy.
Yeah.
And we really needed to shake up what we were doing. Yeah. And we had this weird idea that we were just going to, we were setting goals and they just weren't happening because we couldn't anticipate what was going to happen that week, and it was really tricky. And so we said, okay, so rather than setting goals and trying to get things done by a certain time, let's simply measure our inputs and try to hit a minimum input each week and see if we can do that until the end of the year. And actually, we kind of learned a lot when we did it, and we wanted to share some of our experience of that with you.
Yeah. Yeah, it was an awesome shift. I think it really worked for you because before that you had kind of given up on setting goals, because you would set goals, and this is something everybody does, is you'd set a goal of, I'm going to finish a painting by next week. And then when life happens and you don't finish that painting by next week, then you hate yourself and you spiral down of well, I am terrible. I'm a terrible artist. I can't meet deadlines. And then you keep putting it off, and then you get scared of it. And then you hate deadlines in general because clearly you're not living up to them and you don't ever meet them. So you're like, well, why bother? And then, it's just terrible. And then you don't end up doing any work.
Yeah.
Whereas if you kind of refocus it of, I'm going to put in X number of hours each week, and if I do that, well, you're probably going to finish paintings and you're going to finish work if you do that, if you just keep putting in hours. All of a sudden, that's a different metric, and that's a lot easier to meet.
It's quite a stoic way of approaching work, honestly. I am putting in what I can, and I'm doing what I can control, and everything outside of that is not something I need to worry about. So, in theory. But when we were going through a period in life where we just couldn't anticipate what was going to happen next, when we were going to need to be spending lots of time doing something random, it was really hard to set any form of goal that was like, I want to finish this painting this week, because we never knew when something was going to come up. And then, as you say, you feel like a failure when you can't meet that.
Obviously.
So instead it was like, well, as long as I put in I think we said 3 hours a day for 6 days a week or 5 days. I can't remember. It was 6 days.
Yeah,
6 days a week.
6 days a week.
So that was 3 hours pure painting. As in, like, we were doing other stuff as well, but we just set a timer every time we started painting. We stopped the timer when we went to the toilet. And then the plan was, as long as we've done 3 hours of work, we can rest easy that night. There's no beating ourselves up. We actually, if we went over that planned 18 hours a week, we actually stopped the timer altogether, and we didn't want there to be a precedent of, well, last week I managed 25 hours, I must do that again. It was just, right, I did the 18. If I do more, great, but I'm not patting myself on the back for it. It's
and there's no carryover to the next week or anything like that. You don't get extra credit or anything. It's just, that's what you want to hit, and you want to hit it consistently.
So we set ourselves a little reward type thing for that, because I always struggle with setting rewards or punishments for things, because I cheat.
Right.
I'm
Sure.
like, oh, if I do 3 hours a day, I can play video games. And then I'm like, oh, I could just play video games. This sounds like fun. So I find it really hard to set rewards and punishments for goals. But in this case, we kind of decided that something we both wanted to do was take a vacation. It's something we're in a good position to do. There was nothing major to do at the back end of the year. We really we could do it. We both wanted to do it. We both wanted to do it a lot. And then if we didn't do our 18 hours a week until the end of the year, if either one of us kind of bailed on that, then we weren't going on holiday. And it actually made for a really good reward, because it wasn't earth-shattering if it didn't happen. No. But we'd both be pretty bummed out. Like if one of us didn't do the work, and it was like, well, now we can't go on holiday. It's like, really?
Really? You couldn't do 3 hours of painting?
Seriously, well, great. I'm going to be cold all winter now. So that was quite nice. It was like a nice balance between great and awesome, but not life-threatening for it not to be there.
Right.
Like, for instance, setting yourself a target of, I get to play video games if I get my work done is nice, and it does work sometimes if you're the right kind of person. But it's also kind of, I feel like I get trapped in a cycle when I do stuff like that, of like, either I just cheat and play the video games.
Well, yeah.
Or I don't hit my goal, thus can't play video games, thus feel burned out and miserable, and don't feel any more inspired to do hit the goal again the next day. Sure. Just get more and more depressed and burned out and fed up. So taking things like that, which are pretty fundamental to you being happy and functioning well, I don't think, or setting food rewards. Another one that's kind of tricky, because yes, it's nice to eat, but at the same time, promising myself chocolate if I did well meant that my diet would be shot.
Right.
Or depriving myself of good food when I haven't worked is also not healthy.
Yeah.
So, so that's kind of tricky.
Yeah, finding a good reward is really important, because not having a reward probably isn't going to work either. It's usually not enough to develop a habit without some sort of reward system that you're kind of gunning for. You need that kind of trigger as part of the cycle to keep you doing it all the time. Yeah,
exactly. What's the motivation for doing it if there's no discernible difference between you doing it and not doing it?
Right. I think it was also important that we set it at a reasonable amount of time. So 3 hours doesn't feel like a lot. Obviously, you got 8-hour work days and stuff. But this is 3 hours of pure work. So if I, alt-tabbed away to, browse the internet for a second, that would not count as a second of the work. And that was pretty significant. You realize that it probably takes anywhere between 4 to 6 hours probably to get 3 hours of actual work done.
For sure.
Of sitting there. So when you start to realize that none of your breaks are counting or anything, you realize that 3 hours is actually quite a lot of work. And 6 days a week, that's obviously 18 hours a week. It's a good amount of creative work each week. And this didn't count any of the other stuff we were doing. So I never counted, for instance, any of the reference picture stuff. When we would do a shoot, when we would editing the photos, uploading stuff, doing social media, promotion, business stuff, taxes, finances, none of that stuff was counting towards any of this. So all the other stuff that you have to do, along with the creative work wasn't counting. So 18 hours of creative work is actually quite a lot. But it's also a reasonable amount. It's not so daunting, and I think a lot of people would go immediately for something really daunting.
Yes.
Of like, I'm going to work 6 hours every day.
Yeah, I want to do a 40-hour work week. Like, it
Right.
sounds normal.
Yeah.
But you can bet that most people who are doing 40-hour work weeks don't actually do like nose down to the like whatever it is they're doing for 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
It's much more other stuff padding it out. So
Yeah. I mean, it's why like most companies can drop to a 4-day work week and not see any drop in productivity. People are producing about the same amount of work. So there's only so much you can kind of produce in a given week. And that, varies depending on the person. But I think setting something reasonable is a much better thing. Because if you set yourself an absurd goal and you don't meet it, well, that's just doing the same thing with the other kind of goals of, well, I'm not meeting this goal, so I'm not going to try as hard to meet this goal. That tends to be how we all kind of react to that stuff. So
that's right. And I think also the flexibility, but like flexibility with limits.
Yes.
So we set ourselves, we said 18 hours a week. The goal was to do about 3 hours a day for 6 days a week with a day off. That meant that we could take whatever day off we wanted to. We could take 2 days off and distribute those 3 hours elsewhere. We could take 4 days off and just have a mental few days to make up for it. It still gave us a measure of control. And I think that feeling of control is really important. I think that one of the things that can get really depressing about setting goals and feeling like a slave to them is that lack of control. And like all of us like to feel like we have a measure of control over what we're doing. We don't want to feel like we've got no choice but to do this thing.
Right.
So if we set ourselves targets that are like, I have to do 3 hours a day on this day, this day, this day, and like a friend calls and says that they need help with something, and you either turn them down and feel miserable about it, or you betray your goals and feel miserable about it.
Right.
Having a measure of just a little bit of flexibility just to kind of accommodate, I think that's hugely important. It makes it way less daunting.
Yeah.
It makes it much more enjoyable, much more reasonable, and gives you back that level of control that really makes a difference.
Yeah.
That feeling of control is a big contributor to feelings of depression and stuff like that, when you feel like what you're doing doesn't make a difference. If you feel like you have to do 3 hours a day and that's non-negotiable, then you do your 3 hours and you're like, well, okay, I did it, fine. And you just feel like what you're doing is not of your own volition, it's because you had to do it. Even though you told yourself to do it, it still becomes a rigid frame that you can't mess around with, and suddenly it's a bit like having a boss telling you have to do this, and that's a minimum, and that's like, I'm not going to give you a medal for doing your 3 hours, it's what you're paid to do. It's really important to have that. If you're kind of self-employed, it's important to give yourself a measure of control, that you feel like you do have some kind of ownership over your time, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if I don't have the control to determine when and what I'm going to do, to some degree at least, I get really down and stuff. Like I always hated school for that reason, that it was so structured and there was all these requirements and stuff, that I hated projects like that. It's just, it's really annoying when you don't have control over how you're doing things and where you're going and what you're doing. Yeah, I can't handle it. So.
We like to feel responsible.
Right.
Honestly, we like to feel that what we're doing is making a positive difference, and that we made a choice to do it, and feel good about that, not to feel like we have no choice and we just have to do the thing.
Right.
Another thing that's important about all this, that it was one of my concerns initially, was, we have deadlines. So of course, like if you have a freelance job that needs to be done for 2 weeks' time, the plan there, the goal is I will get this painting done by the end of 2 weeks, which is an output-based goal. And that's kind of the most obvious route to take with that. And I'm bringing this up because actually I was doing a freelance job that had a 2-week deadline when we tried this for the first time. It had actually been a month deadline to begin with. I had to do 2 different characters. And the first character was kind of my comfort zone, actually. And it took me about 2 weeks to paint her. I was setting goals every day, like finish painting her face, paint her hair, like that kind of thing, and breaking it down into piece by piece of this illustration. And it took me about 2 weeks to get through it in the end. So I had 2 weeks left to do the second character. And that is about the point where we decided we were going to switch over to this hours-based system. And there was a little voice that was like, yeah, this is nice and everything, but you have a deadline. You can't like mess around. This is important.
Sure.
So there was kind of a feeling of, okay, we'll see how this goes and maybe pull some all-nighters if I can't get this done. Also, this character, the second one, was not my comfort zone. It was way more challenging for me. I completed him in 2 days. Suddenly, I was like, just put in the 3 hours.
Yeah.
And it turns out that beforehand, where I'd had this lofty paint the face goal, there's no quantification of how to do that. That's just finish the face. There's no accommodating for distractions, for any challenges that come up. It's just finish a face. So that could be a 15-minute job or it could be an 8-hour job. And so you end up kind of feeling like you're slogging away at it. You're taking breaks and getting distracted, looking for new reference. And that can just kind of keep going on and on and on, even for a comfort zone painting.
Sure.
But then with this other one that was more difficult for me, it was, you've got 3 hours. Doesn't matter what you do with them as long as you're focused and working. And suddenly I just breezed through all of the things and it took 2 days. And it was insane. And that really put it into perspective that even though it feels like setting an output-based goal is like more responsible, it's actually really nice to just be like, well, I did the thing, but I've still got an hour left on the clock, so I can do the next thing. And then once you've done it, you check out mentally for the day. You've done the thing, it's fine. Obviously, if you're behind schedule, you need to address that, and it's not a perfect system, but that was a really nice realization for me. I really thought it was going to slow me down, but it massively sped me up.
Oh, yeah.
So that was a good feeling.
Yeah.
Did you find a similar thing?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I loved it because I struggled to concentrate and I struggled to get enough work done. I beat myself up for not working enough. And 3 hours was really nice because it gave me a kind of metric to hit every day. And I was doing some commission work at the same time as well. And it just gave a nice amount of structure of I know when I've done a good day's work, basically. And sometimes that can be hard to see when you're in the middle of, a big 40, 50-hour painting, that you're actually making progress. Because, you sit down and you get up at the end of the day and it's like, yeah, I still have, 25 hours to go. And it's like, well, I didn't get that far, but you're putting in that work every day.
Yeah.
And that's really powerful. It really helped me a lot. The other thing I was doing was a lot of studies around that time. And this is something that I think is super important for people who want to study, is that this sort of system is perfect for that. Because when you're trying to study, it's a little daunting to say, I'm going to learn how to draw faces today, because you're not going to learn how to draw faces today. You're going to learn to draw faces over the next 5 to 10 years. But what you can do is you can spend 3 hours today learning to draw faces. And that's great, because 3 hours of study is wonderful. You can get a lot out of it. You're not going to finish it. You're never going to completely learn something, but you can put 3 hours of effort into something. And that's, I think, an important distinction to make, and something that's super valuable for students.
Setting non-qualitative goals is really nice. Like these open-ended, like I say, learn to draw a face. You feel completely defeated if you just have a bad day, or you struggle with it, or you didn't anticipate it was going to be harder than you thought it was.
Right.
But to say spend 3 hours working on faces, you get a nice tick, and you can say I did that, even though you might not have mastered faces in 3 hours.
Yeah.
You did 3 hours, and that's a reward unto itself. Actually, speaking of reward, unless you have to.
No, I do have something based on what you just said, but we might have the same thing. What are you about to say?
I was about to say, let's try and remember what we're both going to say here, that declaring what you're going to do ahead of doing it is a reward unto itself, which actually makes people finish things less.
Yes.
Is that the same as what you were going to say?
No, it's not.
Oh,
actually.
okay. Hold on to your thought then, and we'll quickly talk about that.
I will hold on to my thought.
Don't forget.
Gone.
No pressure. So they've done studies and found that we all like accountability in our goals, and we like to share what we're going to do with our friends and family, and it gives us a feeling of accountability and that we have to complete the thing we said we're going to complete. But they've actually done studies and found that that makes you less likely to follow through in what you said you were going to do, because in declaring I'm going to lose 10 pounds, you almost are kind of triggering the same reward feeling that you'd get from actually doing the thing. So you just kind of lose interest. This is obviously not everyone or every time, but there is a general trend that says declaring what you're going to do ahead of time makes you less likely to actually do it. So that's if you're saying I'm going to complete this thing, you end up kind of losing faith in it. But if you're just like, I just need to do my 3 hours, it's pretty basic and straightforward and non-negotiable, non-weird, non-murky.
Yeah, I think that's part of the reason we didn't really talk about this to anyone before we did it. We just kind of talked about it after we've done it, which I think is a much better way to do it. And I try my best to not talk about projects that I'm working on until they're done or very close to done, because I have noticed the pattern that if I do talk about a project I'm working on too much, I'm not working on it as I should, and I slack off on it and all that. So I think that's an important note.
So, do you remember what you were going to say?
It was just a very little thing, but one thing you had mentioned is that actually checking things, and we did have a physical calendar, which I think was actually pretty important to visualize how you're doing. So we did it by tally marks every day, and then obviously checked off each week that we successfully completed our 18 hours. And I think the visual and the physical act of doing that every day and then every week is really powerful. And that way you've got a chart that you can see, here's the work I've done. Because you can't always, especially with creative work, quantify what you're doing. But that's a nice way to quantify what you're doing. Of here is a actual representation of the work that I've been putting into what I want to learn. You
can reliably trust in that you will be able to time it and say, I did this. And also to be able to see each other's as well. That was nice. We had like a separate tally, and so we could see how we were progressing. It also meant that we could adjust our week. If one of us was falling behind, we could make sure to sort it out, or if one of us was miles ahead, we could plan a fun thing later that week. And so it was quite nice. The visual was really important. I liked the other thing that we did, that we agreed we wouldn't round out hours. So it would only be even hours. We wouldn't use any of the extra time. So if you had done 3 hours and 45 minutes that day, for instance, that you would only count it for 3. But that means that if you do another 15 minutes of work that day, you can get 4 hours. Which often led us to doing like, well, I can sit there and do half an hour of studies. Come on, then I can get an extra hour, and then I can slack off a little bit later in the week. No one wants to put in 45 minutes of work and then have it not count.
Right,
it's
exactly.
Like, oh, come on, 15 minutes.
So by giving us that really strict rule, it did encourage many, many, many times of us just to sit down and be like, oh yeah, I can paint for a few more minutes. Here we go. And then, because one of us is painting, the other person's usually going to put in a little bit of time too, and then it's all going to work out a lot better. So we ended up doing a lot of extra work because of that, which was a lot of fun. And it also changed our work habits. Do you remember how we pretty much finished around about the New Year and we went to California, and we didn't really know what to do with ourselves because we got so used to doing the 3 hours of work a day that when we went on vacation, we were like, where's the work? You have to do it. And it took us a long time to kind of shift, because we like to work in phases. So we didn't carry this on after the New Year. We found different things that worked for us then. But it was a lasting effect on how we approach our work. It made us more comfortable with the idea of work. It felt less like a chore and more like just what we do. Like getting up and brushing your teeth. It was just a thing we did. And obviously it was hard on some days, but it did become like a habit over time, which was really nice. And that was a good bonus, I think. Full disclosure, there were definitely days especially towards the end, because this was it's like 4 months we kept this up, which I'm pretty proud of us. We don't tend to be able to commit to things for that long. I was like, yes, we just get so distracted. But we did manage to pretty much commit to it. Towards the end, it was harder, partly because of events and traveling. And we had to sort of make an allowance for ourselves towards the end. We always did our best to get as many hours as we could, but we had to be realistic that if we were doing back-to-back weekends, we weren't going to be able to bust out a full working week. But other than that, I believe we did
we've certainly started to wear out by the end, and the end was, I was like, just like clawing my way to the finish line, just like, come on, we can do this. I think I switched up towards the end. I noticed that I was so focused on trying to get painting done that my other work was getting neglected. So as my focus in my work shifted, I had to start accommodating for like whatever project it was I was working on. I started to count hours towards that too. So there were definitely, it wasn't perfect for me,
right,
but it was fantastic compared to what I would have done if we hadn't been doing it. It would have been a lot less. So we did go on holiday. Took us like a month and a half to actually take it, because the habits we developed, we were just like, well, we want to work. Now we have to work. But yeah, we did take our vacation. So that's good.
So yeah, I think that's about it, right?
Yeah, pretty much. So yeah, if you find yourself struggling with trying to get your projects done and feeling just like...
Everybody.
Yeah, pretty much. If you feel, which you will, guilty about not focusing on your work, not getting your goals done, like while or even goals, maybe try switching it up on what you can put in rather than what you can get out. You can't account for the world and what it's going to throw at you, but you can keep yourself accountable and put in just the hours and let life take you where it's going to go.
And if you put in the hours, you're going to get results, like no matter what. It's really hard to put in so many hours and not see results. You have to really try. There's some special cases, sure, but for the most part, you're going to see results.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Alrighty, I think that wraps it up.
That'll do it for now.
We're back.
Yay!
Alrighty.
So we'll see you guys next time for more Creators Chat.
Yeah. See you soon.